Barrington, Illinois, November 27, 1934, 4:15 p.m. Two black government sedans speed north on Highway 14, their engines roaring through the crisp autumn air. Special Agent Samuel Cowley grips the steering wheel of the lead car, his knuckles white against the leather. Beside him sits Special Agent Herman Hollis, a Thompson submachine gun resting across his lap. The temperature reads 38 degrees Fahrenheit. 300 yards ahead, a stolen 1934 Ford Valasedan carries three fugitives. Behind the wheel sits Lester Joseph Gillis, known to the world as Babyface Nelson. At 25 years old, he stands 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighs 133 pounds. His boyish face masks the deadliest bank robber in America. In the passenger seat, his wife Helen clutches a .38 revolver. John Paul Chase occupies the rear, an automatic rifle loaded and ready. The pursuit began 12 minutes earlier when FBI agents spotted the stolen vehicle near Fox River. Radio dispatch crackled through the federal cars. Target confirmed, 3 occupants, armed and extremely dangerous. Nelson checks his rearview mirror. The government cars are gaining ground. He reaches beneath his seat and feels the cold steel of his favorite weapon, a modified Colt .45 automatic pistol, 17 rounds loaded. Safety off. "They're closing in," Helen whispers, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. Chase chambers a round in his automatic rifle. "Let them come." Nelson was born December 6, 1908, in Chicago's poverty-stricken Near West Side. By age 14, juvenile authorities had already marked him as incorrigible. His first arrest came July 4, 1921, for auto theft. The Chicago Tribune called him Babyface due to his cherubic appearance and diminutive stature. His real education began in reform school, where older inmates taught him to crack safes, plan robberies, and kill without hesitation. His first bank robbery occurred April 21, 1930. Nelson and 2 accomplices entered the Itasca State Bank in Illinois, emerging with $4,000 in cash. The teller later described Nelson as polite but terrifying, like a child playing with dynamites. By 1931, Nelson had graduated to major heists. His robbery of a Chicago bank that January netted $52,000, but earned him a 1-year-to-life sentence in Joliet State Penitentiary. The Illinois Department of Corrections recorded his height at 5'4", weight 133 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes, and multiple scars from street fights. Nelson escaped custody February 17, 1932, while being transferred between court appearances. He fled west to California, where he met John Paul Chase, a former machinist turned bootlegger. Chase introduced Nelson to high-end liquor smuggling operations and advanced weaponry. Their partnership would prove lethal. The two men returned to the Midwest in 1933, assembling a crew of experienced bank robbers. Nelson's signature tactic involved overwhelming firepower and ruthless violence. He preferred Thompson submachine guns, sawed-off shotguns, and armor-piercing ammunition. Local newspapers dubbed his gang the Tape Bandits because they covered their license plates with adhesive tape during robberies. March 6, 1934, marked Nelson's entry into the major leagues of organized crime. He joined forces with John Dillinger's gang for a robbery of the Security National Bank and Trust Company in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The heist netted $49,500, but attracted nationwide FBI attention. Edgar Hoover personally assigned 50 agents to hunt the combined gang. 1 week later, the gang struck the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa, stealing $52,000. During the robbery, bank security guard Tom Barkley attempted to sound an alarm. Nelson shot him 3 times in the chest. Barkley died instantly. Local police arrived within minutes, sparking a running gun battle through Mason City's downtown streets. Nelson and Dillinger escaped, but both sustained minor wounds. The FBI's Chicago office received reports of the gang's location at Little Bohemia Lodge in northern Wisconsin on April 22, 1934. Special Agent Melvin Purvis assembled a strike force of 17 agents. They surrounded the remote lodge at dawn, expecting to capture America's most wanted criminals. Instead, barking dogs alerted the gang. Nelson, Dillinger, and their associates escaped into the surrounding forest. But the retreat turned deadly when Nelson encountered 3 federal agents near a neighboring cottage. Special Agent W. Carter Baum stepped from his vehicle, service revolver drawn. Beside him stood Agent J.C. Newman and local constable Carl Christensen. The 3 men faced Nelson across 20 yards of frozen ground. "Federal agents, drop your weapons," Baum shouted. Nelson's response came in gunfire. His first burst from a Colt .45 struck Baum in the forehead, killing him instantly. Newman dove for cover behind the car. Christensen fell wounded, a bullet in his shoulder. Nelson advanced, firing systematically, his cherubic face expressionless. The murder of Agent Baum transformed Nelson from regional criminal to national menace. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover declared him public enemy number 1, following John Dillinger's death on July 22, 1934. The Attorney General authorized a $5,000 reward for information leading to Nelson's capture. Summer 1934 saw Nelson's crime spree escalate. He robbed banks in Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin, each heist more violent than the last. His trademark became shooting bank guards and police officers, even when they offered no resistance. Chicago police recorded 14 separate killings attributed to Nelson between April and October 1934. The FBI's manhunt intensified. Special Agent Samuel Cowley took personal command of the Nelson investigation from the Chicago field office. Cowley deployed over 200 agents across 7 states. Telegraph lines carried hourly updates. Radio networks broadcast Nelson's description. Newspapers printed his photograph on front pages. Now racing north through suburban Illinois, that manhunt reaches its climax. Nelson glances at his speedometer, 85 miles per hour. The government cars match his pace. Behind him, Chase readies his automatic rifle. Helen checks her .38 revolver, hands trembling. There, Nelson points to a roadside park ahead. "We make our stand there." Inspector Cowley sees Nelson's car suddenly veer right into Northside Park in Barrington. The stolen Ford skids to a stop beside a grove of bare oak trees. Cowley brakes hard, his sedan sliding on loose gravel. Agent Hollis opens his door, Thompson gun ready. 3 figures emerge from the stolen car. Nelson carries his Colt .45. Chase shoulders the automatic rifle. Even Helen Gillis holds a weapon. The final confrontation between babyface Nelson and the FBI begins in 4 seconds. Northside Park, Barrington, Illinois, November 27, 1934. Nelson steps from the disabled Ford, his Colt .45 raised toward the FBI sedan. Steam rises from his car's punctured radiator, where Agent Hollis's earlier shot found its mark during the highway chase. The sweet smell of antifreeze mixes with November's cold air. Chase circles behind the car, his modified Browning automatic rifle loaded with .30 MISO-06 armor-piercing rounds. The weapon weighs 18 pounds and fires at 550 rounds per minute. Chase purchased it 3 months earlier from a corrupt National Guard armorer in California for $400 cash. Helen Gillis crouches beside the rear bumper, her Smith & Wesson .38 Special trembling in both hands. She wears a brown wool coat and black leather gloves. Her purse contains $3,200 in stolen bank money and fake identification papers listing her name as Mrs. George Nelson. Inspector Cowley's sedan rolls to a stop 30 yards away. Through the windshield, Nelson sees 2 figures, Cowley behind the wheel and Agent Hollis in the passenger seat. A third FBI vehicle approaches from the south, driven by Special Agents Thomas McDade and William Ryan. The park stretches across 12 acres of rolling hills dotted with oak and maple trees. A small pavilion stands empty near the entrance. Wooden picnic tables sit covered with fallen leaves. The temperature has dropped to 35 degrees. Daylight fades rapidly in the late November afternoon. Nelson's criminal education began in Chicago's juvenile detention facilities during the 1920s. His first teacher was Eddie Bentz, a professional bank robber serving time for armed robbery. Bentz taught Nelson to study bank layouts, memorize guard routines, and plan escape routes with military precision. "Speed is life," Bentz instructed the teenage Nelson. "Hit hard, move fast, kill anyone who stands in your way." Nelson absorbed these lessons during 18 months at the St. Charles School for Boys. He studied lock-picking, safe-cracking, and firearms handling. His small stature proved advantageous. Guards underestimated his capacity for violence until too late. Released on parole in 1924, Nelson immediately returned to criminal activity. He formed a gang of young thieves specializing in tire theft and automobile hijacking. Chicago police records show 17 arrests between 1924 and 1928, though Nelson escaped conviction due to witness intimidation and police corruption. His marriage to Helen Wozniak in 1928 briefly interrupted his criminal career. Helen worked as a salesgirl at Woolworth's department store, earning $14 per week. For 6 months, Nelson attempted legitimate employment at a Lake Forest country club, washing dishes for $18 weekly. The experiment failed when Nelson was caught stealing from club members' lockers. The stock market crash of October 1929 ended any pretense of lawful living. Banks across the Midwest failed, taking depositors' savings with them. Nelson saw opportunity in chaos. His first major score came April 21, 1930, when he robbed the Itasca State Bank of $4,000. The Chicago Tribune reported the robbery on page 3, "Youthful bandit escapes with cash." Nelson's methods grew increasingly sophisticated. He recruited experienced criminals including Tommy Carroll, a former boxer turned gunman, and Eddie Green, an expert getaway driver. The gang acquired military-grade weapons through corrupt dealers and stolen National Guard arsenals. Their signature technique involved overwhelming firepower. Nelson preferred the Thompson submachine gun, which fired .45 caliber rounds at 800 rounds per minute. He modified his weapons with forward grips for better control and extended magazines holding 50 rounds. Local newspapers called it the Chicago typewriter for the distinctive sound of rapid gunfire. Bank robbery planning required weeks of surveillance. Nelson personally reconnoitered target banks, noting guard positions, alarm systems, and police response times. He studied teller cash procedures and identified the vault combinations through inside informants. Gang members rehearsed each robbery like a military operation. The Merchants National Bank robbery in South Bend, Indiana on June 30, 1934, demonstrated Nelson's evolution into America's most dangerous criminal. He entered the bank at 11:45 a.m. with Dillinger and Homer Van Meter. All three carried Thompson guns and wore bulletproof vests. Nelson approached the teller cages while Dillinger covered the main entrance. Van Meter secured the rear exit. The robbery proceeded smoothly until Patrolman Howard Wagner arrived for his routine security check. Wagner entered through the front door, service revolver holstered. He saw 3 men with machine guns and immediately reached for his weapon. Nelson turned and fired a burst of 7 rounds. Wagner fell, mortally wounded. He died 3 hours later at St. Joseph Hospital. The gang escaped with $29,500 in cash and negotiable bonds. Police found 47 spent .45 caliber cartridges inside the bank. Wagner's widow received a $1,000 death benefit from the South Bend Police Department. Nelson felt no remorse. "Cops know the risks," he told Helen that evening as they counted stolen money. Wagner chose his side. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover declared war on Nelson following Agent Baum's murder at Little Bohemia. Hoover assigned his best agents to the case and authorized unlimited resources. The Bureau offered a $5,000 reward, unprecedented for that era, and distributed 50,000 wanted posters nationwide. Special Agent Samuel Cowley took personal command of the manhunt from FBI headquarters in Chicago. Cowley, age 35, had joined the Bureau in 1929 after graduating from George Washington University Law School. His previous successes included capturing Machine Gun Kelly and dismantling the Carpis Gang. Cowley assembled a task force of 200 agents across 7 states. They monitored known associates, tapped telephone lines, and placed rewards on informants. The investigation consumed $50,000 monthly, enormous by Depression-era standards. Despite the massive manhunt, Nelson continued robbing banks throughout summer 1934. His August 17th robbery of the Merchants National Bank in Skokie, Illinois, netted $8,500. 2 weeks later, His gang struck the Farmers State Bank in Elmwood, taking $12,000. Each robbery involved escalating violence. The September 3rd holdup of the First National Bank in Hammond demonstrated Nelson's complete disregard for human life. When security guard Frank Hardy attempted to activate the alarm, Nelson shot him 6 times with a .45 automatic. Hardy survived but remained permanently disabled. He fired like he was target shooting. Hardy later testified. No emotion, no hesitation, like killing was just business. October brought increased FBI pressure. Agents discovered the gang's hideout in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, but arrived hours too late. They found discarded ammunition, stolen license plates, and a handwritten note from Nelson. "You're always one step behind, babyface." The taunt infuriated Director Hoover, who doubled the reward to $10,000 and assigned additional agents to Cowley's task force. The Bureau monitored every known associate, tracked every stolen car, and investigated every reported sighting. Now in Barrington's Northside Park, 18 months of investigation culminate in direct confrontation. Nelson faces his pursuers across 30 yards of frozen ground. Chase adjusts his rifle sight. Helen whispers a prayer. Agent Hollis steps from the government sedan, Thompson submachine gun ready. Inspector Cowley follows, drawing his service revolver. The moment of reckoning arrives as shadows lengthen across the empty park. Northside Park, Barrington, Illinois, November 27, 1934. Nelson raises his Colt .45 and fires the first shot. The bullet strikes the government sedan's windshield, spider-webbing the safety glass. Agent Hollis dives left, rolling behind a concrete picnic table. Inspector Cowley drops to one knee beside the car's front wheel, service revolver drawn. Chase opens fire with his Browning automatic rifle. The weapon's muzzle flash illuminates his face in the gathering dusk. 20-round bursts tear through the FBI sedan's metal body. Glass fragments spray across the gravel parking area. The distinctive crack of .30-06 ammunition echoes across the empty park. Helen Gillis scrambles toward a drainage ditch 20 feet behind the stolen Ford. Her high-heeled shoes slip on wet leaves. She clutches the .38 revolver, unused to its weight. Her brown wool coat catches on bare tree branches as she seeks cover. Agent Hollis returns fire with his Thompson gun. The submachine gun's .45 caliber rounds punch through the Ford's passenger door. Nelson dodges behind the vehicle's engine block, the only part offering protection against federal ammunition. Sparks fly as bullets ricochet off the park's metal pavilion. The gunfight's intensity reflects Nelson's criminal evolution over 4 brutal years. His transformation from petty thief to mass killer began with his 1931 bank robbery conviction. Illinois state penitentiary officials assigned him to the machine shop, where he learned metalworking skills later applied to weapons modification. Fellow inmate Alvin Karpis became Nelson's mentor in advanced criminal techniques. Karpis, serving time for bank robbery, taught Nelson about automatic weapons, body armor, and coordinated gang operations. Their conversations occurred during work detail in the prison laundry. "Banks are just businesses," Karpis explained while sorting prison uniforms. "You need to approach them professionally. Study the target, plan your approach, execute with overwhelming force." Nelson absorbed these lessons during his 13-month incarceration. He studied police procedures, federal laws, and FBI tactics. His fellow inmates included experienced bank robbers, kidnappers, and murderers who shared their expertise freely. His February 1932 escape from custody demonstrated careful planning. While being transferred from Wayne Courthouse to Joliet Prison, Nelson overpowered 2 guards at a railroad crossing. He had memorized the transport schedule and identified the most vulnerable moment during the journey. The escape car waited exactly where planned. Driven by associate Tommy Carroll, they drove to Chicago, where Nelson retrieved weapons and cash hidden before his arrest. Within 48 hours, he had disappeared into the criminal underground. His flight to California introduced him to John Paul Chase, a connection that proved pivotal. Chase possessed military training from World War I service in France. He understood automatic weapons, tactical movement, and coordinated fire. Their criminal partnership combined Nelson's ruthless aggression with Chase's technical expertise. Together they returned to the Midwest in December 1933, assembling a gang of professional criminals. Their first major operation targeted the Security National Bank and Trust Company in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The March 6, 1934, robbery netted $49,500 and announced Nelson's return to major crime. The Sioux Falls job demonstrated Nelson's evolution into America's most dangerous bank robber. He entered the bank at 9:30 a.m. carrying a Thompson submachine gun and wearing a bulletproof vest. Two accomplices secured the entrances while Nelson approached the teller cages. "This is a hold-up," he announced calmly. "Nobody move and nobody gets hurt." Bank President E.A. Youngberg attempted to activate a silent alarm. Nelson saw the movement and fired a warning burst into the ceiling. Plaster rained down on terrified customers lying face down on the marble floor. "Next person who moves dies," Nelson stated matter-of-factly. The robbery proceeded with military precision. Nelson directed tellers to fill canvas bags with cash while accomplices watched for police. The entire operation lasted 4 minutes and 30 seconds. They escaped in a stolen Packard sedan, license plates taped over. Police arrived 6 minutes later to find witnesses too traumatized to provide coherent descriptions. Bank security cameras had been disabled by cutting telephone lines. The FBI investigation began immediately, with agents dispatched from Chicago and Minneapolis field offices. Nelson's association with John Dillinger elevated him to national prominence. When Dillinger escaped from Crown Point Jail in March 1934, he immediately contacted Nelson's gang. Their combined criminal enterprise became the most wanted organization in America. The partnership proved mutually beneficial. Dillinger provided experienced personnel and financial resources. Nelson contributed superior firepower and tactical expertise. Together they planned ambitious robberies across the Midwest, each operation more audacious than the last. Their March 13th robbery of the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa, demonstrated the gang's capabilities. They struck at 2:15 p.m., when the bank held maximum cash reserves. Nelson and Dillinger entered together, Thompson guns ready. 4 accomplices secured exits and disabled communications. The robbery netted $52,000 in cash and bonds, but security guard Tom Barclay resisted, attempting to sound an alarm. Nelson shot him 3 times without hesitation. Barclay died instantly, his blood spreading across the bank's terrazzo floor. Local police responded within minutes, beginning a running gun battle through Mason City's downtown streets. Nelson and his associates fought their way to waiting getaway cars, exchanging fire with patrol officers armed only with service revolvers. The gang escaped, but both Nelson and Dillinger sustained minor wounds. More importantly, they had killed a law enforcement officer in broad daylight, guaranteeing massive federal response. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover declared the combined gang public enemy number 1 and assigned unlimited resources to their capture. The manhunt involved over 300 agents across 12 states. Radio networks broadcast hourly updates. Newspapers offered rewards for information. The April 22nd raid on Little Bohemia Lodge marked the beginning of the end. FBI agents surrounded the remote Wisconsin hideout at dawn, expecting to capture America's most wanted criminals. Instead, they triggered a firefight that killed Agent W. Carter Baum and allowed the gang to escape. Nelson's murder of Agent Baum transformed him from notorious criminal to federal enemy. The FBI's pursuit became personal for every agent involved. Director Hoover authorized extraordinary measures, including wiretaps, surveillance, and informant payments totaling thousands of dollars. Now, in Barrington's gathering darkness, that pursuit reaches its climax. Nelson fires another burst from his Colt .45. Agent Hollis advances, Thompson gun chattering. Chase's automatic rifle stitches bullet holes across the government sedan's hood. Inspector Cowley aims carefully and squeezes his revolver's trigger. The shot strikes Nelson in the left shoulder, spinning him around. Blood immediately soaks through his shirt, but he remains upright, weapon still firing. The battle enters its deadliest phase as wounded Nelson fights with desperate fury. Northside Park, Barrington, Illinois, November 27, 1934. Nelson staggers from the bullet wound in his shoulder, but continues firing his Colt .45. Blood streams down his left arm, staining his grey shirt dark red. Agent Hollis advances across the park's open ground, Thompson's submachine gun hammering in short, controlled bursts. Chase swings his Browning automatic rifle toward Hollis, finger tightening on the trigger. The weapon's bipod steadies against the Ford's twisted bumper. 20 rounds of .3006 ammunition tear through the space where Hollis stood seconds earlier. Hollis dives behind the concrete pavilion, concrete chips flying as Chase's bullets find their mark. The agent emerges from cover, Thompson ready. His next burst catches Nelson in both legs. The small gangster crumples to his knees but raises his pistol with both hands. Inspector Cowley circles left, attempting to flank Nelson's position. His service revolver holds 6 rounds, 4 already fired. Behind him, the second FBI sedan arrives with Agents McDowd and Ryan. Their car doors slam as they take positions with rifles. Nelson fires 3 rapid shots at Cowley. The inspector stumbles, clutching his abdomen. A .45 caliber bullet has penetrated just below his ribcage. He drops to the frozen ground, blood spreading across his white shirt. Agent Hollis sees his superior fall and charges directly at Nelson. The Thompson gun chatters as he advances. Bullets strike Nelson in the chest and shoulder, but the wounded gangster maintains his firing position. His boyish face shows no pain, only grim determination. Helen Gillis crouches in the drainage ditch, witnessing her husband's final battle. She fires her .38 revolver at the advancing FBI agents, but misses. The unfamiliar weapon kicks in her small hands. Tears stream down her face as Nelson's blood pools in the gravel. Nelson's last shot strikes Agent Hollis in the head. The federal agent drops instantly, Thompson gun clattering across the pavement. His body lies motionless 30 feet from where he began his charge. Blood spreads beneath his still form. Chase continues firing his automatic rifle at the newly arrived agents. McDade and Ryan take cover behind their sedan, returning fire with Winchester rifles. The sustained gunfight has consumed over 400 rounds of ammunition in less than 4 minutes. Inspector Cowley attempts to radio for medical assistance, but lacks strength to operate the equipment. The bullet in his abdomen has caused massive internal bleeding. He will die early the next morning at Sherman Hospital in Elgin, Illinois. His final words, "We got baby face." Nelson rises to his feet, swaying from blood loss. 3 bullets have struck his torso, and his legs barely support his weight, but he walks toward Cowley's sedan, Colt .45 extended. His intention commandeer the government vehicle for escape. Chase abandons his firing position and helps Nelson into the FBI car. They transfer weapons, ammunition, and stolen money from the disabled Ford. Helen Gillis emerges from the ditch and joins them in the government vehicle. The entire transfer takes 90 seconds. The stolen FBI sedan speeds south on Highway 14, carrying America's most wanted fugitive toward his final destination. Nelson lies across the back seat, consciousness fading from blood loss. Chase drives while Helen attempts to bandage her husband's wounds with torn clothing. They abandon the government car 3 miles later, transferring to a civilian vehicle stolen from a nearby farm. The farmer, awakened by engine noise, sees 3 figures in his driveway, but lacks courage to confront them. Police find his 1932 Chevrolet missing the next morning. Nelson dies at 8 p.m. in an abandoned house near Niles Center, Illinois. His final words to Helen, "I'm done for. Take care of yourself." He is 25 years old. Chase and Helen dispose of his body beside St. Paul's Cemetery, covering it with dead leaves and newspapers. Anonymous telephone call leads FBI agents to Nelson's corpse the following morning. He lies naked except for underwear, 17 bullet wounds visible across his small frame. The Cook County coroner determines death resulted from massive blood loss and internal injuries. Helen Gillis surrenders to FBI agents on November 29, 1934. Having violated her parole conditions, she receives a sentence of 1 year and 1 day in the Women's Federal Reformatory in Milan, Michigan. She serves the full term and disappears into obscurity upon release. John Paul Chase escapes initially, but agents capture him December 27, 1934, at Mount Shasta, California. His trial begins March 18, 1935, in Chicago's Federal Building. Chase becomes the first person prosecuted under the new federal law making murder of an FBI agent a capital offense. The jury deliberates 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Judge Philip Sullivan sentences Chase to life imprisonment at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. He serves 31 years before parole in 1966, dying of cancer in California in 1973. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover uses Nelson's death to expand federal law enforcement powers. The Bureau receives increased funding, personnel, and legal authority. Congress passes legislation making bank robbery a federal crime and authorizing agents to carry firearms. The war on crime transforms the FBI from a small investigative agency into America's premier law enforcement organization. Nelson's terrorism of the banking system provides political justification for expanding federal police powers during the Depression era. His death toll includes 3 FBI agents, more than any other criminal in Bureau history. Agent W. Carter Baum died at Little Bohemia. Agents Herman Hollis and Samuel Cowley died at Barrington. Their murders galvanized public support for aggressive federal law enforcement. Banks across the Midwest install improved security systems following Nelson's crime spree. Armed guards become standard. Silent alarms connect directly to police stations. Bulletproof glass protects teller windows. The American banking industry adapts to counter the threat he represented. Nelson's grave in St. Joseph Cemetery, River Grove, Illinois, bears no marker identifying him as the notorious babyface. His family requested anonymity to avoid publicity. The headstone reads simply Lester Gillis 1908 to 1934. The empty North Side Park in Barrington shows no trace of the November 27th gun battle. Concrete picnic tables remain, scarred by bullet holes that park maintenance crews never repaired. Local historians estimate over 1,000 rounds were fired during the 4-minute engagement. Federal agents recovered Nelson's bulletproof vest from the stolen Ford. The armor shows multiple impact points but failed to prevent fatal wounds. FBI ballistics experts determined he was struck by 17 bullets before succumbing to his injuries. By December 1934, the era of celebrity bank robbers had ended with Nelson's death.